Friends, welcome to EPZ Pathsala. Today we are going to discuss networks, pedagogy and learning. This presentation is part of your paper, Media and Globalization. In this lecture, we shall focus on various learner-centered pedagogies in relation to learning technologies, including, for instance, the Web 2.0, and also how does network learning takes place through what is called e-learning networks or learning networks. The discussion shall be useful in the context of the current debates on globalization vis-a-vis technology and learning. Now let us first talk about the evolution of learning technologies. Before we further understand various learner-centered pedagogies and how do social media and learning networks contribute to learner-centered learning, let's first take stock of the evolution and status of various learning technologies. That is, technologies which contribute to, or in other words, facilitate human learning. First, it is necessary to understand what do we mean by learning technologies. Imagining a context or situation where the features and affordances, that is, the environmental artifacts of the internet, are combined with various pedagogies and put to practice for the design, development and delivery of learning with the help of various web tools, converged mobile technology and associated software. The earlier form of what is called interactive multimedia and computer-based training, CBT, and the current social media, social technologies, learning networks, Second Life, and there are many. They do pedagogically contribute to facilitate and enhance individual and group learning effectiveness. If they are used properly, the social media and Web 2.0 bring in more collaboration and sharing in the context of learning and make the learning process more constructivist. Context, content and pedagogical affordances of technologies put together, they contribute to design of what is called an effective learning environment. Our classrooms have evolved from the earlier audiovisual aids, which are still in use today in the classrooms, through developments in broadcasting technology and telecommunications technology to the present system of what is called computing. All the three technologies, broadcasting, telecommunications and computing, they have converged together, and the 4G or the 5G platform of smart mobile phones that you have at your hand maybe, today they practice this convergence in our day-to-day life. We have come a long way when the first time computer was used for instruction in 1950, and when in 1977 personal computers entered schools, as also when teaching machines also entered the classrooms in the United States. The 1990s saw the development of the internet-based information and communication technology, and the 21st century witnessed proliferation of what is called mobile technologies. A distinction therefore needs to be made between traditional learning technologies, TLTs, and the modern learning technologies, MLTs, and their pedagogic affordances. In case of TLTs like print and later on broadcast, video and correspondence education, learning was bound by space and time. There was more of transmission than interaction and assimilation of knowledge rather than construction and co-construction of knowledge. The contribution of technology of learning led to linear programming and later on what is called programmed instruction or programmed learning. The pedagogy was dominated by behavioristic models and theories of learning and therefore direct instruction. When the advent of the web or the internet, Web 1.0 technologies got developed, which led to flexible learning, learning interactions, group learning, and interaction between learners and content, teachers and learners, learners and learners, and learners and the context of learning. The parallel developments in constructivism also led to practice of co-construction of knowledge, social negotiation of meaning, and individual and group reflection. New pedagogic models like, for instance, distributed learning, knowledge networks, and communities of practice also got developed. Within the modern learning technologies, there were significant developments when Web 1.0 led to the emergence of Web 2.0. While the traditional pedagogic practices continued, the new practices of collaboration, customization, learner-generated content, social networking, personalization through personal web, and collaborative learning through networked web due to developments in cloud computing were possible. So the newer technologies like Delicious for sharing of resources and tools, Twitter for blogging and bookmarking, Google Docs and PB Works for online collaborative work, Flickr and YouTube for collaboration and sharing of digital media, and Facebook and LinkedIn for social networking, they all got developed. There was therefore simultaneous developments in networked learning, MOOCs, massive open online courses, mobile learning, and the digital learning theory of what is called constructivism by George Simeon. Significant research led to more informed decision making in establishing interplay between technology and pedagogy. As we shall see a little later, connectivism led to the confirmation of the belief that learning is not under the full control of the learner and that connections need to be made effectively and appropriately to navigate through the massive information explosion. Besides learning objects or reusable learning objects, there were developments of Internet of Things, IoT. Commenting on the new emerging pedagogic models, Terry Anderson and Jill Drone in 2011 remarked that the new pedagogic models and technological developments and their interplay may be compared with dancing. While the beat is set and the music is created by technology, the moves of the dance is defined by pedagogy. The evolution of pedagogical methods is in collaboration with the technologies which reinforce the former, that is, pedagogic methods. Now, let us turn to examine the learner-centered pedagogies under this scenario. The developments in media and technology is the consequence of the process of globalization, inasmuch as the latter also contributes to the former. Globalization specifies conditions for education and in turn is promoted by education. Similarly, learner-centered pedagogies specify the conditions of learning outcomes and get further promoted by positive learning outcomes. Social constructivism has been the epistemological foundation of learner-centered pedagogies, and the process involves participation, inquiry, discovery, constructivism, and student voice. As against the previous theories of behaviorism and cognitivism, social constructivism postulates the learning doesn't exist outside the knower or the learner. Rather, individuals construct knowledge and give meaning to the outside world wrought by historical and cultural artifacts. In terms of conditions of such learning, individuals are ensured autonomy and intellectual freedom, collegial and democratic decision making, and flexibility in action and dialogue in the commune for building what is called social understanding. The latest developments in information and communication technologies, ICTs, have further promoted the design and practice of what is called learner-centered pedagogies. You will read more about Carter, but Carter in 2009 examines further if learner-centered pedagogy is at all contributing to improvement of learning and learning outcomes. Also, what learning outcomes are desirable. And further, is the learner-centered technology with social constructivism not leading to singular model being imposed across cultures and classrooms? For instance, the PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment scores for 2006 show that socioeconomic factors and length of time spent in school were the most important variables which influence student learning outcomes. There was no difference in learning outcomes between countries which practiced traditional pedagogies and those which practiced learner-centered pedagogies. Another issue comes up. Are learner-centered pedagogies value-free and apolitical? Such pedagogies carry the tag of being born in the Western democratic but capitalistic societies, and therefore many inherently promote capitalist economy with a democratic governance. It may so happen that such pedagogies also promote the neoliberal ideals of individual freedom and choice, free market, and development of collaborative social learning to effectively do the job of what is called global social worker. The abilities of effective engagement and dialogue and context, the ability to innovate, the ability to collaborate, the ability of self-regulation, all become handy for the knowledge worker, for the knowledge economy. Can therefore learner-centered pedagogies be labeled as neoliberal pedagogies? Further, are such pedagogies becoming universal pedagogies being promoted by all progress, open and democratic educators all over the world? Though such pedagogies are based on the humanistic tradition, Carter further argues that the neoliberal global discourses of late have also embraced this humanist tradition and vision to produce human capital through collaborative and democratic learning environments. Therefore, it is for the educators of the world today to see value in what they are doing in the name of learner-centeredness and see how best culture and community could be the prime contributor to learning in context. Now, let us talk about social media. The advent of social media is not new. It has its own precedences. Usenet in 1979 was the first discussion forum for Internet users to send public messages, followed by Open Diary. Two decades back, there was use of the term weblog, which eventually became blogging. Subsequently, there was developments of MySpace in 2003 and Facebook in 2004, which eventually were known as social media. The earliest development in this is UGC, the user-generated content, which provides different ways that social media can be used. Though Web 2.0 was coined in 2004 and UGC got popularity in 2005, UGC had been used much before the former came into existence. UGC refers to different ways that end users can use various forms of media content available in the public domain. Unlike Web 1.0, where content was created and published individually, in case of Web 2.0, participating individuals collectively and continuously modify content in the public domain. The online content publication led to what is called blogging, wiki, and collaborative content generation under Web 2.0. And the virtual world and Second Life are the later contributions of the new semantic web. Kaplan and Halanin, and in 2010 they have presented an excellent classification of social media based on theoretical foundation of self-presentation, self-disclosure, and social presence and social richness. As you can see from the table on the screen, social media can have high or low presentation and disclosure, and can also have low, medium, or high social presence and media richness. For instance, while blogging or blog is high on social presentation but is low on social presence, the wiki is low on self-presentation but high on social presence. On the other hand, Second Life is high on both self-presentation as well as social presence, while gaming is high on social presence but low on self-presentation. The authors, they define social media, I quote, that as a group of internet-based applications that built on the ideological and technological foundations of Web 2.0 and that allow the creation and exchange of user-generated content, UGC, unquote. The most prominent social media used today include, as you know, Facebook, Second Life, Wikipedia, and YouTube. However, the social media differ in their social presence, which is very important for technology-enabled learning. Intimacy, that is, interpersonal versus mediated, and immediacy, that is, synchronous versus asynchronous, are two important dimensions of social presence. Contiguous and synchronous have larger social presence than mediated and asynchronous communication. Further, media richness is important insofar as the ability of media to reduce ambiguity and uncertainty is concerned. Now let us talk about networked learning. Based on the discussion that we have done so far, now let us discuss on how learning takes place through networks and what is the nature of networked learning. Jones in 2015 points out that networked learning is based on praxis or practice in context, and in which theoretical underpinnings informs its design, as also that it is an ethical tone to engage practices which are considered as good for or by the human beings. There have been discourses on network society, and the social life today is dominated by networks. There may be individual networks or networks for business, commerce, but what we are concerned here is with the networks for learning and networks for professional development in various professions. In comparison to other forms of learning vis-à-vis technology, Networked learning addresses questions relating to contextualization and social co-construction in the process of social change. Usefulness of technological features which could be best for educational use, involvement of dialogue and interaction in the process of learning, and finally, in the social character of learning, in contrast to any individualized learning. Networked learning is believed to stand out as distinct from other forms of learning on the parameters that we have discussed so far. There have been use of connected learning in consonance with networked learning. While connected learning deals with or represents the learning contexts of younger generation, networked learning is much more wider and is generally used for higher education, professional education, and continuing professional development. There has also been use of terms like personalized learning environments, PLEs, in contrast to networked learning. Stephen Downes, who maintains an excellent blog on newer technologies and learning, you must visit his blog. He contends that PLE underlines more of community, context, and creation, which put together could be construed as learning networks. Further, the developments like C-MOOCs also contribute to this discourse. They are connected MOOCs on learning networks. What is important is to discern the structures of the network and individual and group practices taking place in them. Eventually, learning networks contribute to networked learning, and also networked learning should promote more of learning networks. There has been further work on what is called indirect design, which postulates that learning cannot be designed a priori. Rather, it can be designed for some under certain environmental contexts. Therefore, it is important that specific learning networks need to be further studied so that those, including their tasks, tools, the way they can be organized, etc., can be effectively designed. Now, a few words about learning theories for networked learning. Most of the learning theories got developed before the advent of networked media and technologies, as you know. Though network learning could derive from all of these learning theories which existed before, like behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, it may so happen that it can become eclectic in terms of curriculum design, teaching learning, student assessment, and so on and so forth. While explaining connectivism, a theory for digital learning in 21st century, Joe Siemens in 2005 postulated that knowledge is networked, therefore distributed. New learning occurs while experiencing conceptually within networks. The information network of complex and chaotic and shifted spaces from time to time, and learning occurs with facilitation from technology within these shifting spaces. The learners need to possess two important skills to be able to effectively learn. That is, one, the skill of locating required information, and two, the skill of filtering such information for one's own need. Joe Siemens remarked that while all the three important theories were developed prior to the advent of network technology, connectivism is the theory for the current times. In a networked society or technology network or information network, the learners proceed in a chain, working on a network, locate new information, modify their understanding and beliefs, followed by accessing new or additional networks, and the process continues. Learning becomes effective with effective connections between or navigation through network nodes. In 2015, Jones reviewed various learning theories such as behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, and alternative views like pragmatism, situated learning, computer-supported collaborative learning, the phenomenographic tradition, and finally, connectivism of Joe Siemens, and came to the conclusion that while all of these could contribute to networked learning, it cannot be limited to any one of the mentioned earlier. Also, that the need for a theory cannot be answered by simply proposing a new theory. We may, however, consider connectivism, which proposes the development of individual skills to effectively navigate the complex, chaotic, and constantly shifting information networks, facilitating, connecting, and learning. Friends, we have come to the conclusion of the program. We have seen in this lecture discussions on historical developments in learning technologies, followed by an examination of learner-centered pedagogies and social media based on two theoretical foundational axes: self-presentation, self-disclosure, and social presence, media richness. On this backdrop, we also examined networked learning vis-a-vis the digital learning theory of connectivism, and also briefly outlined learning theories vis-a-vis networked learning. With this foundation, we shall next move to discussion on MOOCs and open education resources in two subsequent lectures. Hope you enjoyed the lecture. For more details, please read the e-text of this lecture properly and attempt the questions given at the end. Thank you very much indeed.